Hey, everybody. Welcome to FL Teams Live. We are here with your weekly power ranking show, ranking the NFL teams after week 14. With me, as always, Jeremiah Hensley, host of Fins in the Sea podcast. We'll talk about those Dolphins here in a little bit, as well as the Bucs, the Jaguars, and we'll touch on the rest of the NFL as well. Before we do, let's talk about our newest partner, Symbol. They're revolutionizing the world of sports betting and fan engagement by making sports fandom profitable. Symbol is the stock market for sports. Download the Symbol app and use the promo code FLTEAMS when you sign up to receive a free team stock valued up to $150 when you sign up. Again, download that Symbol app. That's SIMBULL and use the promo code FLTEAMS to get a free team stock valued up to $150. Thank you to our friends at Symbol. And again, the spelling and the promo code are below. I'm still, even after Saturday using the whiteboard, I still can't figure out the left and the right on this damn camera. I'll figure it out one of these days. Well, there were a lot of good matchups in week 14. So let's dive on in with the bottom half of the NFL and let's get rolling. At number 32, we might as well put up a plaque for the Houston Texans, even though they did play hard and almost beat the Cowboys.
Right there.
Number 31, the Denver Broncos stay there. Same thing. They played hard and almost won a game, but they didn't. And number 30, the Chicago Bears. Number 29, Baker Mayfield, miracle, hops the Rams up one spot in the power rankings. Number 28, the Indianapolis Colts. Number 27, the Arizona Cardinals, who lost Kyler Murray to a torn ACL on Monday night. Number 26, the New Orleans Saints, who won because they didn't play this past week. Number 25, the Atlanta Falcons. Same thing for them. Number 24, the Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson, pretty mediocre in his first two games back, and that might be generous. Number 23, the surprising division contending Carolina Panthers. Number 22, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Number 21, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Ooh, that game was fun. Number 20, the surging Jacksonville Jaguars. Big win over Tennessee on Sunday. Number 19, the Green Bay Packers. Number 18, the Las Vegas Raiders. And falling down to number 17 in the rankings, the New York Football Giants, who took it on the chin against the Eagles. We'll probably touch on them here in a second, but let's start with the lowest ranked team in the state of Florida, which we all suspected would be after week 14, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Good game though.
Yeah.
They have Indy's number.
I feel like the football gods watched last week me rant about how terrible the Bucs were, and he said, we're going to prove this guy right on his birthday. That's my God, the Bucs were terrible. Tom Brady looks awful. I'll tell you about a rumor of where Tom Brady might be playing next year off the broadcast, but because I don't want to get into it here. But
oh, geez.
Hint, it hits close to home. Although
yeah,
the Bucs are close to home.
Look, man.
But yeah, the Bucs. Real bad outing, real ugly on Sunday.
I mean, I thought the Niners made Tua look bad. Wow. I mean, Brady, what's so crazy, man, is it's the depth of the receptions. I was reading somewhere like so far this year, Brady's thrown the ball over 40 times in like half of his outings, it looks like. And he's only had like one game over 300 yards. He's throwing 40 times and he's not throwing for over 300 yards. That's just so un-Brady-like in so many ways, because literally outside of the 1 year that he had Randy Moss in New England, they still ran the ball. They ran the ball a lot. I mean, they had 3 or 4 different running backs from the Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis days and all that craziness, but they ran the ball. Like Tampa can't run the ball this year. And that's nuts, man. I wanted Leonard Fournette to come to Miami so bad. I was bought in, but again, he's spotty, man. A good year, bad year, good year, bad year, and Tampa just all together. I can't believe they're still in the playoff spot. We're talking about them. They're literally the lowest ranked team in Florida, and they're winning their division.
Yeah. It's crazy that it looks very likely playing with the schedules. You know, you got the Panthers have the Steelers this week. The Bucs have the Bengals. The Bucs are almost certainly going to lose.
Yeah.
The Panthers, I mean, you know, I think the Steelers are 3-0 against the NFC South this year, so maybe they'll pick up another one. But winnable game for the Panthers, and Panthers and the Bucs. The Panthers, by the way, who beat the Bucs the first go round pretty handily. They play in a couple weeks, and that might be a game that decides who goes to the playoff for the NFC South. And if the Panthers win that game, they're both probably going to finish 7-10.
Wow.
And the Panthers will have swept them. So it's all right here. An interim head coach, Sam Darnold at quarterback.
The redemption of
in front of him.
The redemption of the boy who sees ghost. So Sam Darnold, that's just crazy, man. But again, you know, it's go back to know who you are and what you do well. Carolina runs the ball. Carolina runs the ball really well. The offensive line is put together. They open up huge holes. They've got 3 backs with a lot of different skill sets there. I mean, you think, again, this is the team that traded away McCaffrey. So everybody thinks they're just, you know, phoning it in. But, I mean, hell, at this point, I'd say if I'm in the playoffs, I'd be a lot more scared to face Carolina than I would Tampa. And I've been on that Tampa Bay wagon all year, but I just can't anymore, man. That was an abysmal effort, and it doesn't look any better.
Yeah, and it's late in the season. It's not like, they might put it I mean, if you haven't put it together at this point, the odds of you putting it together, not very good. The one thing I'll say, you know, Dallas, we'll talk more about them maybe when we get to the top half, but is any game a given with Dallas? I mean, we saw Houston was this close to walking out with a victory. I could see Carolina or Tampa Bay going at home, not even going into Dallas. Dallas going into Tampa or Carolina and taking an L because they seem to have some. I don't know if they played to the level of their competition or if they just have a problem stepping on teams' throats.
I think they just can't put it away. It's really odd. And the games that they did put away, where I got all caught up in it, were a couple of defensive takeaways in the fourth quarter that makes it look bigger than it was. But Dallas is a team that gets away from what they do well, and it's really kind of perplexing. You know, I mean, I'm a guy who on various fantasy teams, I have Ezekiel Elliott and I have Tony Pollard. So give them fair share. That's all right. But to me, there's a clear distinction. Like Tony Pollard is a better back. Tony Pollard now is what Zeke was 2 or 3 years ago. I know around the goal line, he still comes in. It's just that it's like the identity just isn't found. And if you find a way to keep Parsons at bay, you can move on that defense. It's definitely, you know, it's different. It's a little bit, who knows? But, you know, we talked about the Bucs there going to the Jags. Somehow the Jags find a way every year with Indy, whether it's knocking them out of the playoffs, whether they're starting to try to get a little bit of a resurgence. Jacksonville just seems to own Indianapolis, man.
Well, it's been an impressive little run here lately. I mean, starting with them beating the Ravens a couple weeks ago. They're showing up. I mean, they're 2 games out now behind Tennessee in the division. It's unlikely they catch them, but they're showing up in the hunt column on TV, you know, when they're showing the AFC playoff picture, which, by the way, I've got to give some credit to the NFC. They've pretty much molded together pretty nicely. It doesn't look nearly as lopsided now as it looked like it was going to be in the beginning of the year. You know, you've got one really bad division winner, Tennessee and Tampa Bay right now. Yes, Tennessee still clinging on to a winning record for now, but probably not after this week. I would predict. But you've got one bad division winner, and the wild cards are all kind of in that same boat. 7-6 in the NFC. It's 7-5-1. So credit to the NFC for rallying and making it look a little bit better. But the Jaguars, these are big wins to me looking forward to next year. I've said this about the New York Jets. To me, everything they do this year is just building towards next year. Next year is the year a young team is going to come together and really have a shot at contending. I think that for the Jaguars. We'll touch on the Jets. Maybe we won't. I think I had them higher than anybody else on my ballot this week. After a tough loss in Buffalo, after a tough loss against Minnesota, they're playing close games against good teams. But
then we're in a league of parity again. If you look right now, you've got 3 weeks left. 4 weeks in the season, including this weekend. And you've got, in the AFC, 6 teams that are within at least 2 games of the final playoff spot. In the AFC. In the NFC, it's very similar. You've got, 3 or 4 teams stacked up within 2 games of the final playoff spot. So there's going to be a lot of interesting matchups over these next couple of weeks. And the way that this season's going, who knows? I mean, like you said, Tennessee, if they keep sliding how they're sliding, they could easily lose that division to either Jacksonville or, God forbid, Indianapolis isn't out of it, even as bad as they've been. So yeah, it's gonna wind up being a sort of a crazy year. The Jets scare me next year 100%. They're still scary this year. I mean, hell, they already beat the Dolphins once, and I don't like that we got them on the schedule again. But that team's only going to get better. They're young, and Saleh has an identity. They're building on it. They're growing. Yeah, unlike their other friends there in New York, who the Giants. It now seems like it was the emperor's new clothes, right? All of us for the first half of the season were like, really? Are they good? Are they really? Oh, no, they're not. No, they're still the Giants. Right. No, they're still the Giants because now Barkley can't keep carrying 80% of the offensive load without getting worn down by week 15. And, you're just a mess outside of that on offense.
Boy, you know what? I keep thinking, boy, if OBJ ever made up his decision, at this point, Dallas signed T.Y. Hilton. The Bills got Cole Beasley to come out of retirement. Yep. I think those 2 teams are moving on. Boy, the Giants could use him, but at this point, it's going to be, even if he comes back, what is he going to do for the last, 2-3 games of the year? Maybe he's just going to sit out all season. He just wanted the whining and dining aspect of mid-season free agency, I suppose.
Yeah,
who doesn't want to spend a night in Buffalo?
Well, hey, I'm sure you got some nice meals, some good tickets to games. Why not? Go enjoy yourself. It sounds like Dallas is still circling him pretty hard, though. Jerry Jones loves to play the media the same way that OBJ does, so that they're just swimming around each other. But I think at this point it makes more sense for him to sit out because you don't have a lot of time left to get used to a playbook. And I get it.
Yeah.
Natural talent is going to take over at some point, but I mean, it took him a while to start making the kind of impact we thought he would in LA. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know that he's going to come in and I mean, Deshaun Watson's proven to everybody that rust is rust when it comes to the NFL. Deshaun Watson looks like he wouldn't be starting in Houston right now.
No, he's I was going to make a massage joke, but I'm going to be the bigger man. All right, let's move on before I say something stupid. Let's hit the top 16 teams. Number 16, the fast-falling Seattle Seahawks, barely staying in the top half, falling out of the playoff spot that they had for quite a long time. Number 15, the New England Patriots, who right now would be in the playoffs. Number 14, America's sweethearts, the Detroit Lions. Everyone's rooting for them. Number 13, the tumbling Tennessee Titans, who looked real bad 2 weeks in a row. Number 12, the Washington Commanders. Number 11, the Los Angeles, not San Diego, Jeremiah, Chargers. Number 10, the New York Jets stay in the top 10 after the loss. Actually, I think they moved up to the top 10 after their loss to the Bills. Number 9, the Miami Dolphins fall only one spot in the rankings after their second straight loss. Number 8, the Minnesota Vikings. Number 7, the Baltimore Ravens, barely squeaking by without Lamar Jackson, but getting by nonetheless. Things got real tight here from 3 to 6. Number 6, the San Francisco 49ers. Number 5, the Dallas Cowboys. Number 4, the Kansas City Chiefs. Number 3, the Cincinnati Bengals. Number 2, the Buffalo Bills. And number 1, unanimously for the first time, the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's start with the Dolphins. We had an FL Teams broadcast of that game. Little bit frustrating of a football game for Miami. Frankly, there's from a non-Dolphins fan perspective, I will say that the final score was a lot closer than the game really was. They were dominated. They were start to finish in every aspect of that game. They were quite fortunate. Literally, with one of their touchdowns was just a lucky break. They were quite fortunate to be in it scoreboard wise the way they were, but they have to take a good hard look at the mirror offensively and defensively after the performance against the Chargers, and they get to travel up to snowy Buffalo to look in that mirror Saturday night. So Jeremiah, talk to me about the Dolphins.
I said it before we hit this stretch. This is the defining stretch of the season, and right now we're 0-2. I thought we needed to come out of this at least 1-2. I didn't know. I didn't think we could win 2 out of those 3, but San Francisco exposed the offense a little bit. But I have never seen Tua as off, not even in his rookie year, not even his first game out, as he was in that game. I mean, at one point, I think he was 3 for 20, right? In order for him to end up like 10 for 28, he needed to complete 5 in a row on a drive. It was absolutely awful. The ball was being forced to Tyreek Hill nonstop. Tyreek Hill was getting 70% of the targets, and you started seeing that this was a team who wasn't afraid to play man up with Waddle and Hill on the outside and have safety help toward the middle, right? So they would man them up and then have safety help toward the middle. And for anybody who's watched enough Dolphins game this year, that's been the money. Those 15-yard crossing patterns, those little outs, those ends, those in that middle, Tua has just dissected that. But for a guy who's, quote unquote super ability, his superpower as a quarterback, if he's going to be elite, is accuracy and timing. And when he doesn't have that, his arm strength doesn't make up for it. And I mean, so they really got exposed. Again, just stopped running the ball. So, it's funny. We were talking before this. I think if anything, for me as a Dolphins fan, I'm happy about the thing going to Buffalo because I just don't think we can throw the ball 35 times. I think this is a game where whether we can do it well or not, we have to line up and run the football. And like that needs to happen with this team this time of year. You have to establish the run. When this offense was clicking on all cylinders, it was Jeff Wilson. It was Raheem Mostert. They were making plays out of the backfield. They were basically non-existent last week. And that just can't happen. I mean, rookie head coach, young team, the defense, bend, don't break, which we talked about too, but you can only do that so much. You're going to break eventually. You can't just bend and be on the field, twice as long as the other, as the other team and still be able to pull that off. So I'm concerned with Miami. I think they're barely hanging on in that 9th spot. Looking back through, if we look at the NFC, I'll tell you this, I do think if I look at the 6 and 7 spots there, Washington Commanders and the New York Giants, I like Seattle and Detroit better than both those teams. I think Seattle and Detroit could easily come into those playoff spots, especially over the Giants. But that's just me deflecting my pain away from Miami And then, you know what, we're going to double down and do it again with another live broadcast this Saturday night so that we can, anyone who wants to join us in watching the Snow Bowl in Buffalo, please come on in.
Yeah, I'll bring my whiteboard.
The Macolino 2000.
1982. I don't know. So that is, looking ahead to week 15, obviously that's a highlight there. That's a primetime Saturday night game. Again, join us on FL Teams. It'll be a good time. Segueing into what you said about the NFC, also looking ahead to week 15, this was the matchup I was going to bring up. You got a big game, the Lions at the Jets. Two young teams, both battling to get into the playoffs. The Jets have just been so close. Mike White literally got snapped in half. I thought the guy wouldn't see the field again the rest of the year, and he just came on right on back after a little bit. Yeah. Tough kid. That's the USF in him, I'm sure, not the Western Kentucky. And Detroit, looking at their schedule, I mean, they got the Jets. They have the next week. They have the Panthers, which is actually shockingly probably going to be a huge game for deciding the NFC playoff picture for both teams. Then they got the Bears and the Packers the last 2 weeks of the season, winnable games.
Mm-hmm.
The Lions get through. I mean, they can win out these 4 games and become the first team in the modern era to start 1-6 and make it to the playoffs. By the way, no one's going to want to face them in the playoffs just say that they win out those 4 games. They're going to have gone on a 9-1 stretch.
Yeah.
Who is going to want to face that team? They're going to be facing either the Vikings if they hold on to the 2 seed, which I think is pretty likely, or the Niners maybe if they get into the 2 seed, or the Lions could potentially become the 6 seed and face the 3. And anyways, nobody's going to want to face the Lions if they're that hot going into the playoffs with literally nothing to lose either, and they play that way.
You definitely don't want them anywhere controlled in a dome. Jared Goff's a different quarterback when the elements aren't a factor. At home this year, Jared Goff's numbers are just crazy. I mean, he's literally top 5 quarterback in the league, maybe overall, but definitely at home. He's putting up crazy stats. And they just handled Minnesota. I mean, that game, silly enough, it wasn't as close as that score came out to be, and that score didn't come out to be close. Detroit was never in doubt there. I do think, for me, week 15, I'm excited about tomorrow night. Tomorrow night is going to be an interesting turn, and it's going to tell a big divisional story, right? Because you've got now San Francisco, Deebo Samuel is going to be out for some time. Mm-hmm. Not quite sure how long, but that's a huge portion of their offense. They're Purdy's already down.
Injuries too.
Yep, Purdy's banged up, so they're already back down on that. And you're playing a Seattle team that gets Kenneth Walker III back tomorrow. So Seattle's getting their top running back as they're gaining something on the offensive side, as opposed to San Francisco losing it on the other end. And I believe the game's in Seattle. No matter what, Seattle, good or bad, it's always a tough place to play. And, I mean, right now the Seahawks, if they somehow pull that off, they close to within a game of San Francisco for the division lead. So,
yeah. It's interesting. I've talked many times for weeks about, I was wrong, because I had the Seahawks number 32 coming into this season. And the more I watched them recently, I'm like, I wasn't wrong. They just went on a hot streak. Like, they won some game. One thing I said during Sunday's broadcast that we did, Seattle is 0-4 against the NFC South this year.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's one of the on the flip side, by the way, looking at the Steelers-Panthers game, which is somehow important. Steelers are 3-0. They basically have only won against the NFC South. Seattle is 7-2 if you take out the NFC South. They're battling for home field advantage if they don't have to play that tough NFC South. So I don't know what to think about them, because obviously from my perspective, I see them play the most when they've played the NFC South.
Right.
And they've gotten their butts kicked by all 4 teams. I mean, they had some close games in there, but frankly, they were outplayed by all 4 of them.
Wow.
I watched all 4 of those games, and I would not think, that most people probably watched the Bucs game against Seattle and Germany, but none of they all 4 were like that, where it was like, yeah, well, Seattle, maybe they got a puncher's chance, but boy, they're not as good as this team they're playing against. And that's the NFC South. So that's where I think, even with the injuries, I think San Francisco, who I don't know if I'm getting high on them or if I've just seen them too much lately against the Saints, the Dolphins, and the Bucs. And boy, they've, frankly, their offense got a lot better when Jimmy G went down.
Yeah.
I mean, that offense did next to nothing against the Saints. They did a lot against the Dolphins and the Bucs.
They did.
And the only difference is really the quarterback. I mean, that's a interesting. That team's maybe had some interesting fortune as far as quarterback injuries and where it's led them this year. We said it earlier when Trey Lance went down and the 49ers jumped a few spots right away in our power rankings. Like, well, yeah, Jimmy G is better.
Yeah.
They're more ready to win. Nobody knew. I think we all held them back when Purdy came in for Jimmy G, but now it's like, Purdy looks like he's maybe got a little more of an arsenal. I mean, as far as just a skill set.
Yeah.
He's definitely got a higher ceiling than Jimmy Garoppolo has.
Well, 100%. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned, so we're talking about the quarterbacks. Isn't this week, finally, Desmond Ridder is going to get his first start, right? Benching Mariota and Ritter's coming in to try to jumpstart that Atlanta offense. I think he's the last of the quarterbacks drafted in the first or second round this year. He's pretty much the last of the quarterbacks who's going to get a start, huh? Malik Willis already had one.
Yeah, I think in the first 3 rounds. Yeah, I think he's the last one to get his shot. It's very interesting. I was talking about this with some rumors going around that Sean Payton may return to the Saints next year, as opposed to getting traded elsewhere. And the biggest argument I had for it was because he doesn't have a quarterback. Neither does any other NFC South team. The Bucs aren't. Tom Brady's gone. Kyle Trask, who hasn't played in the NFL, sure, that they don't have a quarterback. The Panthers, I think Darnold's a free agent, but even if he wasn't, they don't have a quarterback. Matt Corral missed the whole year. So the Falcons, maybe with Ridder, have a quarterback. If Dennis Allen stays, Andy Dalton might be the Saints quarterback next year because he seems to love him. And look, Andy Dalton's numbers are fine, but the rumor, what the rumor is. If Sean Payton comes back, who the Saints quarterback will be.
Your favorite man, wouldn't it be? That'd be TB12, baby.
Yeah. So I probably wouldn't be able to talk about the Saints next year if that were.
Yeah. I'm leaning more on the side of I don't know how much longer a competitor like Tom Brady will stay around. I mean, while he was still making the playoffs, making a run toward there, building the super teams, I think it's easier to stick around. But nobody wants to watch yourself get old in the NFL. We saw it with Montana. It wasn't pretty. At some point you got to bow out and walk away, no matter if you're considered the GOAT or not. And this year has just been an absolute disaster. And I don't think there's any guarantee, no matter where he goes, that it bounces back next year.
I don't think it will. I think the only thing that would make sense, and I do get it, with Sean Payton, I mean, Drew Brees won the division his last 2 years with basically a spaghetti attached to his body.
Yeah.
Incredibly talented and still incredibly accurate, but he just didn't have. And he was injured all the time. So there's a lot of reasons. They still won 13 games and 12 games and won the division both years in his last 2 years with him throwing, with less arm strength than Teddy Bridgewater. So Tom Brady, I could see where, I got 1 year left. He was able to protect the guy. Still he led the NFL in passer rating his last 2 or 3 seasons. Drew Brees did combined. So, Tom Brady could say, all right, if there's a guy who's going to protect me and put me in a position where all I have to do is throw 7-yard in routes to Kamara and Michael Thomas all day, and load up once or twice a game and try to throw it deep down the field, but that's it.
The strangeness of
sense, but I don't know if I could bring myself to. I don't know what my head would explode.
Yeah, but look, the strangeness of watching Brady this year is a guy who watched him in New England more than I ever wanted to as a Dolphin fan. Brady always seemed to be on the exact same page as at least two of his receivers, right? It was as if at least two of his receivers at any given time were living in the same headspace, be it Gronk and Welker or Edelman, or, there was always somebody that there was like that intuitive connection. And Tom's played with this group down there for a couple of years now.
And he's
had that same connection doesn't exist, but this year's gone.
It's gone this year.
Yeah.
Mike Evans and he, I think, had a couple great years. And this year they are completely off.
Yeah.
It's weird. It is very weird to see.
The timing falls off that bad.
Yeah, I do think not enough. I think Isaac made this point on when he was on here earlier. Brady's skill set is not high enough at this point in his career that he can afford to not be 110% invested. And he's not. Yeah. He's not. You don't leave your team for almost 2 weeks in training camp when you have your third string center. When you have a guy who's injured for a week in training camp, and week 1 rolls around, a lot of times they're like, they got to get the timing right. Tom Brady voluntarily took a couple weeks off away from his team in training camp. That's, first of all, that would never fly in a Sean Payton coach team. I tell you that much. So that's one strike against Todd Bowles, who now is looking at a rebuild and probably a short leash on his second chance as an NFL head coach here. I mean, because Brady leaves, there's not a lot of great pieces really on this team at this point.
You almost got to blow it up, right? I mean, because there's not enough left for you to build around that's young enough, right? You can't start a rebuild with Mike Evans, and you can't start a rebuild with Fournette. Like, those are guys who you put them in play now when you're ready to win. So it's almost like you just have to blow it up to get the talent level back in and growing. I had this thing, I mentioned it with Montana earlier, and I think back to it was a great story again when Jordan came out and started playing for the Wizards, and the Wizards made the playoffs, and Mike still had some crazy good games. But at the end of the day, man, I don't care about Brady's legacy the way I cared about Jordan's, but Brady is the longer he sticks around through this, it's going to tarnish where he was and what he was. And I just don't see that as a dude that's going to keep taking that chance, right? I mean, if you're young NFL fans right now and you only remember Brady for the past, 8 years, you've still got 1 or 2 good spots bouncing around in there, but you're remembering just as many bad ones too. And, I don't know. Maybe I'm overplaying it. I hate to see it. Sometimes, like I say, I just want to see somebody walk off into the sunset and just know when it's time to be done.
Yeah, well, he had that opportunity. I mean, when he won the Super Bowl with the Bucs. I think he had it this past time when he did retire. He lost in the playoffs, but he led a huge comeback against the eventual Super Bowl champions. Not a bad way to bow out. It's kind of like when I talked about the Lightning losing the Stanley Cup, I'm like, look, they're not going to win every single Stanley Cup. I knew that it was going to come to an end at some point. If it comes to an end, losing in Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals is the perfect way to do it, because you still made it to the Stanley Cup. You didn't get to Game 7 where I'm heartbroken because it was far-fetched that, we went. But it's like, you getting to Game 6 means you put up a fight. You didn't get swept. You still won your conference. That's the thing. Brady had his chance. Now, almost certainly he's going to be walking out with a losing record this year. I mean, the odds are very much against, I think, them winning 3 out of their last 4. Maybe we'll
Falcons Saints game's actually a big game this week, Jeff.
Yeah,
Saints Falcons.
For the Falcons, it's more so than the Saints, I suppose.
Either way, neither one of them are out of it.
No. Look, the Saints statistically, because of the hole they're in head to head in the division, they'd have to win out, and one of their games is against the Eagles. So the Saints are pretty well out of it because even at 7-10, they lose tiebreakers to the Panthers and the Bucs. So
okay, well, that one hurts.
Yeah. So and look. It would be a 4-way tie for first place if Mark Ingram had picked up a first down instead of going out of bounds with an injured knee, half a yard short. That's how close that division would be. It would be kind of fun to see all 4 teams tied at 5-8 going into a dogfight for the last 4 weeks of the season. But alas, Mark Ingram, the Saints training staff, just had to take that away from all of us NFC South fans.
Hey, now we get a rematch of that enthralling tie from a couple of weeks ago, right? The Giants and Commanders going back at it. Like we're playing in extra minutes now. This one might come down to penalty kicks.
I wonder if either team is interested in winning the game.
Yeah. That's that's for that last. I mean, they're both in that bottom half of that playoff push right there in the NFC. So that's an interesting game. All the games are getting better this time, man. Titans and Chargers, another big one, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Titans need to get right quick. I expected a real big bounce back after Philly kind of embarrassed them, and they went out and got embarrassed again.
Yeah,
and now go into LA.
Who finally has all their weapons back is what I said pregame Sunday.
Yep.
They got all their weapons back, and boy, did they look dangerous on offense.
They did.
I mean, scary. But yeah, Tennessee has to luck again. They're lucky they're in the division they're in.
Yep.
the 2 Souths. Not
you get away with a lot more there than you do anywhere else.
Yeah, you got a lot more leeway. Now, it's not the AFC or the NFC East where all teams have winning records in those 2 divisions, and still battling to squeak into the playoffs. Some fun stuff ahead, and hey, the most fun will be Saturday night if you join us on FL Team. So make sure you are subscribed on YouTube, you're following on Facebook, Twitter, everything else, Instagram, all that other stuff. You can check out the great whiteboard clips I drew up from last week. The best was obviously when I drew Tua and the ball or receiver. Yeah,
you diagram that play beautifully. Yeah, you diagram that beautifully.
Yeah. That was clearly my most showed my football IQ the most. But yeah, check that out. Stay tuned to podcasts that FL Teams puts out. I think you've got a Fins in the Sea coming here soon, where we'll talk about the state of the Dolphins, or Jeremiah will, and you got a Bolts and Bats in the Bay coming out soon as well, where I talk about the excellent Tampa Bay Lightning and Tampa Bay Rays, the winning franchises in the Tampa Bay area. All right, that'll do it for the Power Rankings this week. Thank you, Jeremiah.
Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you, James Macolino, for the ballot. For Jeremiah, myself, we will see you on Saturday night, and we'll see you back here Wednesday with the updated Power Rankings.